Sergio Perez took Red Bull's fourth win in a row after a delayed, wet and tense Monaco Grand Prix. The Mexican held off Ferrari's Carlos Sainz as pole sitter Charles Leclerc was left to rue a bungled Ferrari strategy which dropped him behind title rival Max Verstappen. Welcome to the Grand Prix cap for the Monaco Grand Prix here on the 5 Red Lights F1 podcast. My name is Aaron Harper. In this episode I'll be sharing my thoughts on the race in Monte Carlo, debating all the major talking points and rating every driver's performance. Before I do that, very quickly I'd like to point you in the direction of my social media channels at 5_red_lights on Twitter and 5 Red Lights on Instagram, where I post my thoughts on the events of the F1 world as they happen. Please like and share this podcast. It would be really beneficial to its growth. And if you can also leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode if you think my show is worth it. Now then, with all that out the way, let's dive into the Grand Prix cap for Monaco.
It's been clean all the way through for Checo. Great strategy from Red Bull that really worked for him, got him in front. The race got stopped, he made a good restart, and he has maintained control throughout the rest of the race. For Ferrari, who had the 1-2 on the grid here in Monaco, for Charles Leclerc, who has never finished this race, well, he is going to finish, but not on the podium. Victory in Monaco goes to Sergio Perez for Red Bull. He wins with Carlos Sainz in second, Max Verstappen in third, and Charles Leclerc finishes a Grand Prix at home for the first time, but he will be bitterly disappointed having...
And we'll start with, well, we're going to start in rainy and wet conditions here in London as well. It's Monday evening after the Monaco Grand Prix, and I think the Monaco monsoon has arrived where I'm living. It's currently pouring with rain. But don't worry, there's not going to be any delays in how I get this review to you. Let's start with Sergio Perez, who championed the streets of Monaco. What a weekend for Sergio Perez. He's been so much closer to the pace of Max Verstappen all this year, and he threatened to win last time out in Spain. And to be fair, it's been coming. But for a poorly timed safety car in Jeddah, he might have won there as well. And once he got in front, he had the composure to stay there, which tells you everything you need to know about Sergio Perez right now. He's full of confidence and he's at one with that Red Bull car. And this was despite his tyres, the fronts on his medium Pirellis, heavily graining. Now, there was a bit of fortune to his first couple of wins in Formula 1, in Sakir and Baku. But arguably this was his best. Even though the Sakir win, which was his maiden win, he was last at one point. This race win was earned by having the sheer pace when he needed it, and he needed a smart strategy from his Red Bull team. So it wasn't a fluky win for Sergio either, as he'd been simply quicker than Verstappen in every session through the weekend. Verstappen might well have improved on his final qualifying lap, but we'll never know, because Sergio Perez actually spun at Portier, which robbed us also of a magical lap by Charles Leclerc. I mean, add that to the list of sensational pole positions that were never actually completed, that can go alongside Verstappen's run in Jeddah. Even without the team orders in Spain, Verstappen may well have won anyway, but at least Checo could have been afforded the opportunity to take the win himself. And in Monaco, he did just that. He put himself in position to win the race, and the fact that Verstappen was stuck behind Carlos Sainz played into Checo's hands, because there was no way of getting Checo to give up a win and potentially hand it straight to Ferrari. It would have been interesting how they navigated it had Perez been leading Verstappen in a Red Bull 1-2. My inkling is that Perez would not have moved over for Max, and perhaps today they wouldn't have risked it. Well, I say today, it's the day after. Perhaps in Monaco they wouldn't have risked it because of the wet start, so they might not have wanted to have either car on slick tyres going offline and potentially, one losing control and taking the pair of them out. And in Monaco, Sergio left his team in no doubt that he is absolutely capable of fighting his corner on the track. His weekend was just so clean and so fast throughout. I mean, from Friday to Sunday, he was nigh on perfect. 15 points now off of his teammate who leads the World Championship, Perez could seriously mount a title challenge in 2022, which I must admit, I didn't expect to see. And coming up next, Azerbaijan, a circuit where the Mexican has excelled, and previously he's won. And then there's Canada's Montreal course, which will probably suit the Red Bull's top-end speed quite nicely indeed. And then we head to Silverstone. A Red Bull might be leading the Drivers' Championship again for the second year in a row heading to Silverstone, but this time could it be Sergio Perez? Really? I mean, if he continues this sort of form, then absolutely he could. I mean, message me on social media or leave a comment on the YouTube video and let me know if that's a plausible scenario to you. But I suppose we have to ask ourselves, did Red Bull win this race or did Ferrari lose it? And really it's a bit of both. Ferrari, they complicated their strategy by pulling Charles Leclerc in on from the extreme wets to the intermediates, which then lost him a place to Perez because Perez had run longer and then was able to deliver the lap time, and the tyres take a little bit of time to come up to temperature in Monaco. And then we saw it happen again when they went for the slicks. Ferrari were too keen to try and make the strategy call, I think, and get it right. They actually ended up handing the win to Red Bull on a plate, and Red Bull, perfectly positioned right on the tail of the Ferraris, were just there in the window with enough pace that if Ferrari put 1 foot wrong and pitted 1 lap too early, they were there. And to be honest, with Sainz driving the strategy, I mean, he could have easily won that race. He lost some time on his outlap behind Nicholas Latifi, so it might not have come off for Red Bull. But all the circumstances aligned, and Red Bull were there on hand to take the victory away from Ferrari, who had left it there available to them because they hadn't been able to open up enough of a gap, because there's just simply not the performance between the cars to do so. And they just got their strategy 1% wrong. 1 lap too early. They cost Charles Leclerc because they called him in and they misread how quickly Charles was catching Carlos to be able to stack them together in the pit lane. And obviously Leclerc was furious about that because he could have run a lap longer and perhaps prevented Red Bull from making that pit stop. He could have maybe run 2 or 3 laps longer and even turned the race on its head again and regained his track position in the lead. But as it was, Ferrari, they dropped the ball on strategy, as they used to so famously do when they were in the hunt for a victory. They would find a way to lose the race and hand it on a plate to Mercedes. And Mercedes were always there gobbling up the victories. Red Bull are doing the same at the moment because Ferrari have the car for pole position at pretty much every circuit. It's just a big question of whether they can keep that position. And in Monaco, where track position is king, they managed to give it away twice. So let's cast our minds back to pre-weekend. And this was in the days after the Spanish Grand Prix. Christian Horner gave an interview to the BBC, and he said that there is a chance that teams might miss races to avoid spending over the budget cap. Now, is this a possibility? So, Horner reckons 7 of the teams would probably need to miss the last 4 races to come within the budget cap this year. Now, there is a sort of slap on the wrist penalty for going 5% over the budget cap, but with the current budget cap at $140 million US, that's under threat due to the worldwide inflation on prices. Christian Horner says energy bills, cost of living, costs just generally are going up exponentially, and F1 is not exempt. Freight has quadrupled, and that's something we can't control. Now, there are 3 other teams who are on board with this, and it won't shock you to know that they are Mercedes, the world champions, Ferrari, and McLaren. Now, at Alpine, Otmar Szafnauer, his perspective on it is different. He says his team anticipated inflation with their budgets for this season. He said, When freight costs go up by 2.5 or 3.5 million, but your development budget is 20 million, can you not make your development budget 17 million and still be under the cap? You can. And speaking over the Monaco weekend, Alfa Romeo team principal Fred Vasseur had little sympathy as well for the top team, saying the best solution is to switch off the wind tunnel and stop bringing developments to every race. We can all do that. And this is something that will probably rumble well into the season. We'll probably not get a solution until maybe September, where the FIA may increase the budget cap because they can see that inflation hasn't come down or something. But to suggest that teams are going to miss races on purpose is drastic. That is really, that's almost worst case scenario. I don't seriously think that will happen, because I believe that due to the Concord Agreement, the teams are all contractually obliged to turn up and race. I believe it was Manor who pitched up at the Australian Grand Prix in, I think it would have been 2015 or 2016, simply to fulfill their part of the contract, that they had to be there at the race weekend. They had no way of qualifying the cars. I think they just did a couple of laps in practice or something. I don't think they'd even shaken the car down ahead of it. So the teams might just be there. We might, I mean, this is not something I say in jest or for a laugh. Could we have a repeat of Indy 2005, but 4 times with certain cars having to come in and not race because they can't afford damage, or I don't know. Who knows? We've got 20 cars on the grid, and the FIA and F1 seemingly want to do everything they can to turn away Andretti and other companies. Yet here we are with the current teams saying, "Oh no, we can't afford to stay within the budget cap. We're going to have to overspend because of X, Y, and Z." And those reasons are legitimate. Inflation is a very real thing, and it's affecting everybody. No one can deny that, and you'd be a fool to try to do so. But to have it culminate in these teams missing races, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I think we won't get that far. I mean, Indianapolis 2005 was a pawn in a bigger chess game between Max Mosley and the F1 teams at the time. I think the teams and the FIA and Formula One are slightly more aligned on certain things at the moment, so I don't see it getting to the point where teams miss races. I think there will be an allowance and some compromise made on both sides moving forward, but we'll wait and see. Another talking point moving through the Monaco weekend was of Daniel Ricciardo and McLaren, the partnership not meeting expectations, and would Monaco, one of the Australians' favourite tracks, bring him a reprieve? It's safe to say that Daniel has not enjoyed a huge amount of success at McLaren, having joined the Woking team from Renault in 2021. Yes, there was that fantastic victory in Monza last September, but aside from that, the high-profile performances have been few and far between. Ahead of the race weekend in Monaco, the Australian admitted that McLaren boss Zak Brown's assessment of the partnership not meeting expectations wasn't wrong. The MCL 36 in the hands of the under-the-weather Lando Norris looked quick in practice, while Ricciardo made an error in free practice too, which brought out the red flags and definitely dented his weekend chances. Even for a Monaco specialist like Ricciardo, lost track time is difficult to overcome. If you want to know a little bit more on my thoughts on potential driver replacements for Daniel Ricciardo, I actually wrote a piece on my website, so go and check it out, 5redlights.wixsite.com/5RL-pod-blog. So I just talked through a few drivers who I think McLaren would choose to replace Ricciardo with if they were to conclude their partnership at the end of 2022. And that's not to say that it's a done deal, that Ricciardo is on his way out. It's the end. Ricciardo's actually been okay this year, but he's just... Because I think Lando Norris is performing so brilliantly, we're all sort of rethinking just how good Lando Norris is, and Ricciardo having his struggles at the same time. We're going, well, Ricciardo is supposed to be this great driver. Has he lost it? There's definitely a need for McLaren to bring the car more towards Ricciardo and a stronger package in terms of winning races. But this is Daniel Ricciardo. This is Dan Dare. He is the master of the dive bomb. And yet we just don't see it. The car doesn't allow him to tap into that and use that ability on the brakes. I won't say it's strange. It's very unique to this driver and car combination, I would say. But it's happened to other drivers where they just go to a team and they don't get on with the car. It won't be the first, it won't be the last, but it might be the beginning of the end for Daniel Ricciardo. Hope not, because he is a brilliant driver and I would love to see him win more races and even contend for a world championship. That would just be fabulous. And if he could do it with McLaren, even better. And talking of the end of things, is this the end of Monaco? Have we just seen the last Monaco Grand Prix for some time? It's a track where you can barely race. The words of Carlos Sainz pre-race when asked about racing Charles Leclerc for victory from the front row. And Scott Mitchell, writing for the race, reported that Monaco will likely get a 1-year extension for 2023. But there are some major issues between a longer-term deal being agreed between Formula One and the Automobile Club de Monaco. Gosh, that's a mouthful when you had a long day at work already. Now, F1 boss Stefano Domenicali is playing a bit of chicken with Monaco, which shows serious strength and confidence in F1's position. Lewis Hamilton has called for layout changes, which Formula One have also suggested, such as a change to the Nouvelle chicane that was proposed, and the ACM have just brick-walled it. F1 want control of the TV feed, which ACM currently controls the only local crew to do so in the whole calendar. And fans, like at home, have found it difficult to follow certain aspects of the race. We've missed rare exciting moments in races, like Vettel and Gasly in 2021. Instead of seeing the bravery of the highest order, we were shown a replay of Lance Stroll bouncing over the curbs at the swimming pool. That damages F1's product because people tune in to see drivers race and compete, and it's dangerous and it's very narrow. Can they both get through there? I mean, the start of this year's race definitely didn't help the FIA in terms of the F1's product. So Monaco aren't solely to blame, but it's certain that Monaco's overall power on the F1 calendar is diminishing, and with other glamour events cropping up, such as the Miami Grand Prix, and we're going to Las Vegas in 2023, Monaco is at risk of being pushed out here, and they need to do something about it. The argument that the cars are too big for Monaco is a little bit of a non-starter. It's accurate, but the cars were just as big in the late 80s and early 90s, so this issue has been around for many, many years. Just think Mansell and Senna, where the Williams just simply couldn't get past the McLaren, and it's iconic all these years later, but I'm sure Nigel would have liked to have got past. Would F1 miss Monaco? Well, we had a taste of that in 2020 through the pandemic, and the championship wasn't really undermined hugely because of it. It's not an underscore event like the Indy 500 is for IndyCar or Le Mans is in the World Endurance Championship. Monaco is... its value hasn't diminished to the drivers. It's still a challenge to win there, but it's just so much more difficult to achieve it if you're not on pole position or at least on the front row. But it's not like there are only there is only X amount of races to win, but there are so many races now on the calendar. Monaco is just so small within it. So I don't think it would be missed hugely. But one saving grace for the Monaco Grand Prix could be Charles Leclerc. And if he keeps challenging for wins and World Championships, he could be the sole reason why Monaco stays on the calendar, because they seem to like tapping into drivers' home events when they're performing well. Just think of Michael Schumacher, and we had 2 German races when Alonso was doing well, 2 rounds in Spain. Now we've got a round in Holland because of Max Verstappen. Could we hang on to Monaco just because of Charles Leclerc? Well, as you may have heard, my throat was getting a bit dry there, so I've had a swig of my favourite energy drink. I won't reveal who, just in case. Multiple energy drink brands are available. Just know that this one isn't Red Bull. Not because I don't like the F1 team, I just simply don't like their product. It doesn't taste very nice to me. That's my personal opinion, though. So, obviously, try it yourself. And it's also not rich energy. Don't worry. I'm not Satan. So let's jump into some driver ratings. And we'll start with the World Championship leaders, who are now Red Bull. And still Red Bull, of course, because they collected a few more points than Ferrari did in Monaco. And we'll kick things off with the defending world champion, Max Verstappen, who started 4th, finished 3rd. I rate him as a 2.5. It was a weird weekend for Max because he was outpaced by Sergio all the way through. He just seemed to be at 95% with his car. And he couldn't find that remaining few percent to just nail it and then transform his weekend. So the way the race panned out, he was a little bit fortunate that he was able to make up at least one place, and then that Charles Leclerc dropped so many, because otherwise he could have been looking at another championship deficit, only by a small margin, but still. He said after the race, as a team we did a really great job. We managed a good strategy. Of course, finishing 3rd for me is not ideal, but I wasn't able to improve my lap time yesterday, so that's just how it goes. Nice to see that he's accepted that is how it goes, rather than his little rant on the radio about how it shouldn't be allowed to happen. Unfortunately, Max, that is just the game. That is the game in Formula 1. He has fallen foul of that game a few times in the past, driving too quickly through yellow flag zones and picking up penalties. And sometimes it goes through, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just leave it at he's had good fortune in the not too distant past, which has strongly benefited him. Still a reasonable result, the fact that he finished ahead of Charles Leclerc. He mustn't forget that is important in the title picture. But his teammate Sergio Perez was, of course, the race winner. He started 3rd and won the race. I rate Checo's performance as a 4. He said, "It was really hard for me to think straight after the race. I was full of adrenaline and so much energy going through the race. Once I heard my national anthem on the podium here, it hit me. It is a dream come true for any driver in the world to tick the box in Monaco, and I can just be extremely happy. We were quick all weekend, we kept our heads down and knew today with the right strategy we could make things happen." And Sergio also dedicated his win to his mother back in Mexico, who is unwell. So get well soon, Mama Perez. And she should be very, very proud of her boy because he drove magnificently. This is a new Checo I think we're seeing now. And at the age of 32, he's in his prime. And who's to say? I mean, Raikkonen raced till he was 42. We could see Sergio Perez for another 10 years. And if he can keep this level of performance going and build on it, there is absolutely no reason why he can't have that challenge for the championship this year or next year. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, they've given Max Verstappen a contract to 2028, and if he can't quite get on top of these cars and Sergio Perez does, well, I mean, that would be quite a turn up for the books, wouldn't it? Let's move to Ferrari, who bungled their strategy, of course. And Charles Leclerc, he qualified on pole position for the 2nd year in a row, actually managed to start the race this time, but he finished 4th. At least he did finish. He said, "I'm disappointed to have lost this win, and it's a tough one to take, especially at home. It will be important to understand exactly what happened and make sure that this doesn't happen again." It's like what I said with Verstappen. It's that final few percent. And between Charles and Ferrari and a few other variables in the racing world, it's just not quite falling Leclerc's way at the moment. I think what he can take a little bit of comfort from is the fact that he did have the pace. He'd built up such a massive lead, and it's taken a massive swing of events to lose him that championship lead. But he certainly does have the speed to return to the top, and there's every reason that he can take this championship right to the wire with Verstappen, or even Perez. So he was obviously very disappointed to have missed out on that race win. But there is a bigger picture at play, and I'm sure once he's calmed down, he'll realise, okay, only 3 points lost to Verstappen. On another day, he could have done a standing start in the wet, and he could have been out turn one. So, silver linings. I know that they're, few and far between at the moment for Charles Leclerc. I rate his performance as a 4. So his lap in qualifying was just sublime as well, and he was on for an even better one. He just had the pace all weekend. He was the fastest man and driver combination in Monaco, so he should take some comfort from that too. Let's talk about his teammate Carlos Sainz, who started second, finished second. I rate him as a 4. Missed out on winning in Monaco again for the second year in a row, but again showed he is a driver who can excel around the streets of Monte Carlo. He said, "It was a tough race, but overall I cannot be too disappointed. We made the right call to go from wet tyres to slicks, but unfortunately a lap car on my outlap cost me too much time, and we missed the opportunity to take the lead." He also produced the save of the day on the pit straight, where he touched the wet patch on the slicks and had the car sideways going down the pit straight. I thought he was headed with a one-way ticket to the barriers. He was very fortunate not to. Had he spun on the wet and then crashed out, that would have just summed up Carlos's season right now, wouldn't it? But thankfully he didn't, and he managed to get himself on the podium again in Monte Carlo. Moving to Mercedes now. They didn't have the pace this weekend. They were struggling with a different type of bouncing, and the fact that the car was so stiffly sprung, it was physically jumping off the track rather than the chassis, like sort of porpoising, isn't it? Of course, bouncing up and down. So let's talk Lewis Hamilton. He qualified 8th because of the red flag, although I doubt he would really have improved that much. He might have got 7th, maybe 6th. I don't really think he was going to be quicker than Russell, so he'd have probably ended up finishing behind his teammate anyway. Although that said, he would have been out of the way of the Alpines, who were just driving so slowly. It was unbelievable. Hamilton said it was one of those days in Monaco, stuck behind other cars for most of the race, and in the end just cruising, not being able to overtake. He had really rapid pace in clear air, but it's worthless in Monaco because if you don't have track position, you're just going to end up at the gearbox of another car and you won't go anywhere unless they get out of the way or just drive on at Saint-Devote or something. So, yeah. Tough weekend for Hamilton, not quite getting the rub of the green still. He could have got past Ocon, but the Frenchman turned in and there was a bit of damage. So, the second race in a row where Lewis has had contact with another car that actually wasn't his fault. So, he's kind of an innocent victim again. But his teammate George Russell, who started 6th, have I rated Lewis? I rate him as a 3. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton started 8th, finished 8th, but I rate him as a 3. Apologies if this is all a bit messy. So let's sort this out and let's get this right with George Russell. He started 6th. He finished 5th. Again, top 5 finish for George, rating George's performance as a 3. We encountered some of the limitations of our car at this track, and we've learnt a lot and can put that to good use in the coming weeks to take another step forward. Overall, it's a decent result, and I'm confident that we've got stronger days ahead of us. Yeah, good positive talk from George. He drove really well. He had really good pace. And after the restart from Schumacher's crash, he had race-leading pace. He was able to live with the front guys in the 16s. That tailed off when the graining kicked in and it became apparent that he wasn't quite going to keep up consistently with them. He did start to fall back by a few seconds at a few tenths a lap. But again, George is driving brilliantly. He's driving so well. And anyone who doubted that George Russell was ready for a Mercedes seat is being well and truly put in their place, I think, because this is not the all-conquering Mercedes where, anyone could win in that. But this is a very difficult car to drive. So for George to be beating Lewis Hamilton, I know Lewis is having bad luck and they're trying some wacky things with the setup and whatever, but for him to be delivering the way he is, all the credit to George Russell. He's been fantastic. Lando Norris of McLaren, he started 5th and finished 6th. A swap of positions for Russell and Norris, the old junior driver mates. They had a bit of a wheel-to-wheel coming out of the pit lane, I am led to believe, but I have not been able to see. Well, I could probably find it on F1 TV, but I just don't have the time to go back through and find it. We weren't privy to a replay in the race, so that's unfortunate. Come on, ACM, sort that out. Give us some proper replays. Lando Norris, I rate him as a 3. He said we got some decent points and it was nice to get the fastest lap towards the end as well, so I'm satisfied with the weekend. Yeah, Lando still recovering from tonsillitis, looked a lot more upbeat and more energetic than he did last weekend, so there's definitely more to come from Lando. And hopefully there's more to come from Daniel Ricciardo. We touched on him earlier, but he qualified 14th, finished 13th. I rate him as a 2, because when you're down there's not much you can do. He said, we ultimately just weren't quick enough this weekend. And his crash in FP2 severely dented his chances this weekend. And once he qualified 14th, barring a 1996 Monaco Grand Prix, you are in for a hard day. Let's go to Alfa Romeo, who were tipped for a strong weekend actually, but they didn't really deliver. Valtteri Bottas qualified 12th, finished 9th though. I rate him as a 2. He missed FP1 with a MG UK issue, and then the ride of the car limited the pace, but that probably could have been solved with the extra running in FP1 because the team said that they sort of saw where it was going wrong and didn't have enough time to fix it. Bottas said, we took some calculated risks and they paid off. They did pay off. So maybe 2 is a little bit harsh, but I'm going to stick with it because, to be honest, I expected a bit more from Bottas and Alfa Romeo this weekend. His teammate, Zhou Guanyu, he qualified slowest of everybody and he finished 16th in the race. I'm going to give him a 1.5 because he just struggled for pace all weekend. But he did produce a miraculous save that was only bettered by that of Sainz, in my opinion, because we see drivers get loose down towards the Nouvelle chicane quite regularly, actually, and they just shoot across the little escape road, and then they hand they back off or they hand the place back, and that's exactly what Zhou did. For Sainz, it was save it or you're out of the race. So, it's just one of those opinion things, I guess. Let's move on to Alpine and start with Esteban Ocon, who qualified 10th but finished 12th. He actually finished 9th on the road, but a extra time penalty of 5 seconds bumped him down the order. So I rate Esteban's performance as a 2 because he just lacked pace throughout the race and he was just a rolling roadblock to any and all cars, crucially any and all that were behind him. He caused contact with Hamilton, which earned him that extra 5 seconds. I suppose that was just about fair because Hamilton was almost certainly going to pass into Saint-Devote. Then Alonso's shenanigans cost him his points, even with the 5 seconds, because Alonso was driving like a total grandad. I'm talking of Alonso. He started 7th, he finished 7th, and I'm going to rate him as a 1.5. He drove up to 4 seconds a lap off the pace on purpose. It was just so stupid because after about 7 or 8 laps after the restart, Alonso was about 25-30 seconds behind the race leader. And that's not car performance. You cannot tell me that's car performance. Well, we know it's not because he was told to look after the tyres. Only at Monaco can you get away with driving like that. Hamilton was just stuck. He had nowhere to go. And then Alonso bangs in a 1:15 to go fastest of anybody and leaves Hamilton behind by 3.5-4 seconds. Fine, manage the tyres, but you don't need to be driving 4 seconds a lap off the pace. I think that's a bit much. Even at Monaco, it was just a bit silly. If they weren't sure that the mediums were going to make it to the end, why on earth put them on in the first place? Stick it on the hards. Because the only team that had any reason to go on the mediums were Red Bull, because they needed to protect the win with Perez and they needed Verstappen to be on them just in case there was a skirmish at the front that he had a tyre advantage over Leclerc, or at least was on the same compound. Everybody else could have just stuck the hards on. Let's go to AlphaTauri, who didn't score any points this weekend. Pierre Gasly qualified 17th, started 11th. I rate his performance as a 3. He missed out on his getting his Q1 lap in by just a few metres, basically, because that really strange red flag came out. He was one of the first drivers to go to Inters, which catapulted him up the order, but ultimately it was a pointless weekend for the Frenchman. He had the pace to be much higher up the order, but once you qualify that low down, as I said with Daniel Ricciardo, you're in for a tough afternoon in Monaco. And Yuki Tsunoda, he qualified 11th, finished 17th. The AlphaTauris managing to swap positions. Going to rate Yuki's performance as a 1.5. This was poor from Tsunoda, having out-qualified his teammate. He went off at least twice, maybe 3 times at Zandvoort. Not really much else to say. Haas, they had a double DNF. Kevin Magnussen qualified 13th, failed to finish after a water leak on the ERS system. He said, no points today, even though I think we had the car to do it. We knew we could fight. I'm going to rate Kevin as a 2 on that, because he did drive fairly well. And Mick Schumacher started 15th, also failed to finish, also rating a 2. The second heavy crash of the season, he explained it as, unfortunately I went a bit too wide, probably about 10 centimetres at the end. And that's enough to lose all the grip that you thought you had, and the result is what happened. The pictures we saw initially were of the car in 2 pieces, which looks more dramatic than it really was, and the cars, remember, are designed to break away to dissipate the energy, so that the energy isn't transferred through the driver, which makes complete safety sense. So it looked worse than it was. It was still a hefty shunt, but I've certainly seen bigger impacts at the swimming pool chicane. I mean, even Jake Hughes' F2 crash was probably a bigger impact than that of Mick Schumacher's. Let's switch over to Aston Martin. Sebastian Vettel got himself into Q3 with 9th place on the grid, finished 10th in the race, courtesy of Ocon's penalty. Valtteri Bottas, of course, the other beneficiary from that. I rate Sebastian's performance as a 2, a point and some valuable data gained. He said, we learned more about the car, optimising the setup with the new parts we introduced recently. All these steps are taking us in a good direction for the races to come. I suppose that's just what it is at the moment for Aston Martin. They've got to understand that new package that they've shoved on the car and get to grips with it. They've almost set themselves back 5 or 6 races in terms of knowledge and development. But having worked with the other style, then they might have a little bit more to work with. I'm not a data engineer, so I don't know. But they're probably very clever people there. And I'm sure they'll get on top of it in some form or fashion. And someone who didn't really get on top of it in some form or fashion was Lance Stroll, who damaged his car ahead of qualifying in practice 3. He ended up qualifying 18th, screaming down the radio, which at least shows that Lance cares about his career, and he's not just a paid driver there to, I get to drive around in an Aston Martin Formula 1 car. He really cares about his racing, so at least he let us know that, which is good, and I think Lance is a decent driver. He did manage to finish 14th, although he did pick up a puncture on the formation lap behind the safety car. I rate his performance as a 1.5. Wasn't really that good, and the contact with the barrier in third practice really ruined his weekend. He probably wouldn't have scored points because he probably wasn't quite fast enough for that, but he got to the checkered flag, so at least there's that. He echoed Vettel's sentiments after the race, saying, "This race gave us plenty of opportunities to continue learning about the car's recent developments. I'm confident we will be able to develop the car for both slower and faster circuits in the near future. They need to do that because otherwise they're going to be pretty nailed on for 9th in the championship. And the team bottom of the championship is Williams. Alex Albon finished 16th, didn't finish, rating was a 1.5, retired with an unexpected bouncing on the straights, almost made it into Q2. There wasn't really much for Albon to get hold of this weekend, so I can't really rate him very highly. Latifi, at least he finished the race, which gets him that extra half a point. He started 19th, finished 15th, survived a slide into the barrier on the formation lap to make the checkered flag. So, kind of sums it up for Williams. They're my driver ratings. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And we have a share of top performer this weekend with Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc all scoring a 4. No one getting higher than that. But yeah, I think those three drove probably the best. And they were 1, 2 and 3 on the grid. So that probably tells you about the performance that they had. And probably tells you plenty about the Monaco Grand Prix circuit as well. In that the top 3 drivers in qualifying all rated highest for the weekend. It's now time to rate the race, and I'm going to give it 5 out of 10. The rain made it interesting with strategy and the timing of the switch from wets to inters or wets to slicks and just onto slicks in general before it returned to the normal Monaco standard after the Schumacher-induced red flag. Perez's graining on the medium tyres built up tension towards the end, but did anyone seriously think he was going to lose the lead to an overtake on merit? Not me. It needed a mistake. It needed something. It needed an anomalous event to happen for Sainz to get through. So as always, I put the rating of the race to other podcasters and writers. So Philip Matthew from the Grip Strip podcast gave the race a 6, as did Grid Talk host Louis Edwards. Fellow Grid Talk host Ruby Price gave it a 5. Monkey Seat podcast Carl King scored it a 7, saying, I think we had some great tactics and racing for what is in essence a rubbish track. Carl didn't use the word rubbish, he used some slightly more colourful language, but I'd like to keep this PG, so Carl, if you're listening, that's why it's different. Tom Downey of Everything F1 said 7 for Monaco, so 5 for a good circuit. Poor Monaco getting a bashing here, and the bashing continues from Let's Talk F1. They gave the race a 1 out of 10, saying the Monaco tax for dull racing brought it down from a 4 at most others. Jason Devine gave the race 11 out of 10, saying Checo gets the better strategy for once and Sainz stood up for himself and convinced the team to let him stay out. I mean, 11 out of 10, I'm not sure it was quite that good, but okay, that's his opinion, that's fine. And that's absolutely fair enough. Finally, the Forum of Racing gave the race a 7, saying it was nice to see all 4 leading contenders racing for the top position. That was good. It would have been nice for them to be able to overtake those. So hopefully we get to see the top 4, maybe even the top 6 if Mercedes can be on the act as well. And at a track where overtaking is possible, yeah, let's do it. A 6-way brawl for the win of a race. I mean, I'm going to show my age here. It reminds me of if you were a professional wrestling fan, the Hell in a Cell where they threw 6 wrestlers in there. You had The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Triple H was in there, I believe. Kurt Angle. Rikishi was in there somewhere for some reason. And The Undertaker. The Undertaker threw Rikishi off the top of the cage, I remember. Yeah, this podcast has taken a sharp tangent from motorsport to wrestling from 20 years ago. Anyway, let's get back on track and see how my predictions fared. For pole position, I went with Charles Leclerc, which I got correct. Well done to me. I went for a win for Leclerc, second Hamilton, Russell third, and none of them were on the podium. It was Perez, Sainz, Verstappen. My bold predictions were Verstappen to finish the race, but he won't win and he would be off the podium. I got that bit half right. Double points for Haas. It was a double DNF for Haas. So that wasn't great. And a minimum of 1 safety car in the race. So I believe there was 2. Well, there was definitely 1 because of the safety car ahead of the red flag after Schumacher crashed. But I think we can count it as 2 because when they did, well, maybe even 3. So they did the formation lap behind the safety car. Then they did 1 lap before the red flag. So that would count as a safety car. Then they did the safety car again for lap 2 before they sent them on their rolling start. So I believe there was maybe even 3 safety cars. But I went with 1, and definitely at least 1 happened. So 2.5 of my predictions, as my phone begins to ring. 2.5 predictions correct this weekend. And the checkered flag now waves on another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know I've been a little bit all over the place. I put that down to being tired from a full day of work. I'm a sports coach by day. Don't yet do this professionally. So we've had a day of camps where I've been playing games with children through the day to keep them occupied over half term. So if you like the episode, leave a like or rate the podcast on Apple or Spotify. If you give the podcast 5 stars, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode, which will probably be the Azerbaijan Grand Prix cap. I might do something in between because we've got a weekend free next week, but we'll wait and see. Looking forward to Azerbaijan, where almost anything can happen and will happen on the streets of Baku. So prepare for madness, a bit of a wait, and then utter chaos, because that's kind of the recipe for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I've also been writing for F1 Chronicle and Inside F2 over the weekend, so head to their websites to check out my works. Check out the Flying Lap for Monaco on YouTube, and also the Driver of the Month vote for May is now open. Hit the link in the episode description to cast your vote, or find it on my Twitter or Instagram somewhere on there. Also head to my own personal website for more articles from me. I've done the Daniel Ricciardo article I mentioned earlier. I've also done part 2 of the underrated seasons, where I looked at the 1998 Formula 1 season. So lots for you to find from me, even if there isn't a podcast forthcoming next week. There is Formula E to look forward to in Jakarta, which should be fun. So enjoy that race, and I will see you when the 5 red lights go out.